What up? Reverend Brian Akers here, and this is It's Really Real, Racial Equity. And today I have the joy of inviting a member of my own spiritual community, a young woman who is she wouldn't call herself a food blogger, but she has a food blog, and she was heavily involved in our organization's youth program for a number of years. She won the Centers for Spiritual Living Youth Champion Award in Las Vegas, I believe it was back in 2016, somewhere back there. And I have to tell you, she is just a magnificent presence. She sings in our church all the time. And we're always looking for new reasons to include her in what we do on Sundays. And so I'm gonna ask you to give a warm welcome to Miss Jenna Pekofsky. And I'm gonna ask Jenna if she'd go ahead and introduce herself to you right now too. Jenna, tell the people who you are.
I'm Jenna Pekofsky. As Brian said, I was raised in this teaching in Science of Mind, New Thought, Spiritual Living, whatever you want to call it. When I was in 4th grade, my family first started attending what now is Oneness Center for Spiritual Living, Columbia, and what it was then. So I was literally a child and came up through the teen program, was on the International Youth Leadership Team, went to University of Delaware and got my degree in hospitality business management. I work in a Michelin star restaurant in DC, really doing what I love, which is serving people and talking about food all the time. And yeah, I'm really happy and excited to be a part of this conversation because I am just a person and I am a white woman, and living in this time, I am digging into everything that I possibly can to be the person I want to be in this world, which is striving for equity and love for everyone.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Jenna, for being here today. It is my joy and pleasure, it's my gift to be able to have you here working, being a part of this project. It's really real. And so because you're so fantastic and a member of my spiritual community, I would love to invite you, if you would be so bold, as to do an affirmative prayer for us.
Heck yeah. Always good to start with a prayer. So please join me in this affirmative prayer. So you just take a moment to breathe into this moment, into this space, in recognition that there is only one power, one presence, one infinite intelligence, one unlimited and unconditional source of love. It is every breath that we breathe, everything that we see, and everything that we feel. And in this vastness, in this expansive oneness, I know that the interconnectedness of all that is includes me, and includes us, and includes everybody. I know that this power and presence resides in me, in my deepest, most pure place of self. I know as we go forward today in this conversation that we tap into that divine wisdom. We come from a place of love and joy of expression, that those who are listening feel it touch their hearts and their innermost selves. And by continuing to be authentic and break down the walls and break open the barriers that prevent us from expressing that truth of who we are, as those things just dissolve, humanity as a whole awakens to what it can be and what it truly is inside. I am so immensely grateful for this knowing. So grateful for the opportunity to have real conversations with people that I love and admire and care about. So grateful for the words coming through me from that divine place, and grateful for all that ensues. And so I let this word go into the law, into the universe from which they came through me. All of these words go out, I release them, and I know that they are so. And so it is.
I'm just so excited to have you here, and we've thought of some things that we could discuss, but the one place that I really wanted to start is, so the reason I started the It's Really Real project was to give my voice kind of that unfiltered space, right? Because as a spiritual leader, I'm asked to show up in a lot of different contexts, and it's important for me to value those contexts and to show up the way that I'm asked to show up, and so I do my best to do that. But I also needed to create, like manufacture a context so that my voice could just be totally untamed and do whatever it's to do. And as I'm finding that voice, I'm finding like where it rubs certain people wrong and where it reaches people that would never have otherwise been reached. And so finding that balance has been really, really interesting journey for me. And so I'm wondering for you, what is it, if you were to describe what voice you're aspiring to have and what the experience of discovering your voice has been like in this conversation of spirituality and racial equity, how would you describe that?
Oh, I love that question. Thanks. I think first and foremost, I want to come from a place of compassion and love. Like for me, from the beginning of understanding what it meant to question what my purpose on this planet is, I think it's been very clear that I'm here to be love, and that means a lot of different things. So lately, I have been working and exploring this development of my own voice. Being raised as a woman, specifically, I think in that part of my identity, I have a tendency not always to say stuff when I think it, because I've been in a lot of contexts where people talk over me or shut it down. And also, I have a tendency to overthink every damn thing I'm going to say because I want it to be that thing. I want it to be love. I want it to be clear and kind and powerful and purposeful and factual, all of those things. And so, yeah, lately it's been doing as much as I can on my end to have the information and the confidence to say the things that I feel and the things that I learn, because they are valuable, even if my little ego brain wants to be like, no, nobody really cares what you have to say. To know that is true, and to continue to really listen to other people, particularly Black people and people of color right now, in sharing their authentic experiences and listening to leaders who inspire me with their communication, so that I can learn more about what types of words I want to say and the ways that I want to say them. As a person that has had moments of being like, whoa, you just said that.
I think I give everybody at least one of those moments at some point, right?
Right, but it has also been instrumental in me being like, maybe I could use a little bit more of that. And even if it's never going to look the same as anybody else. And that's kind of the beauty of us all being individual humans, is that we get to speak with our own voice and figure out what that means.
Well, and I've been raised with the white male context, right? So like the consequences of me talking shit have never really been what the consequences would be for, let's say, a woman in your case, or for a Black, for Black folks, or for other folks who don't have that same cultural authority behind the words that they speak. So really, I got to tell you, whenever women and Black folks and other folks in other segments of intersections of identity really claim their voice and speak passionately, that's my favorite shit. Because I've had the freedom to do that my whole life. And to think about the idea that there are people that have had to literally micromanage all of their speech for the sake of their own physical, spiritual, mental, career, financial, whatever, health and wellness, really feels liberating to be given the gift of being able to have a space where people can be authentic. And so I really hope that you bring that voice today, and whatever that looks like for you. I'm going to be doing my It's Really Real thing here. So, and you guys should know that Jenna and I are actual friends. So like, if I say some shit or if we go, yeah, like that's part of our friendship, because we love each other to death and we can do that. In difficult conversations, is what this thing is all about, right?
Yeah. And I want to add really quickly just to that, I've come to realize recently that probably, definitely part of my struggle to even find my own voice is that in my life, although there have been the moments where I've been maybe quieted, I've never really been like barricaded from sharing. Like there haven't really been that many barriers. I haven't really had to overcome like, if I don't say what I need, I'm never going to get what I need. And I think I'm really coming to terms with that in the fact that there are so many powerful, especially like Black women that I know that like know how to say it because there's no other way to be in our society, and still have to face so much more backlash and internal struggle in that expression too. So recognizing that I'm like kind of like have been a little bit privileged and coddled, and that contributes to me not always speaking up, is now motivating me to speak up.
And what an important intersection to recognize, right? Especially for white women right now, right? What a really important and powerful intersection for women to come into contact with, because I think what we're experiencing is this really interesting dynamic of people awakening simultaneously to, you know, the depth of how insidious the nature of their oppression has been, like for women per se, right? So many women are becoming liberated and finding feminism and really finding out, wow, I didn't even realize that I was getting these cultural programmings, that I was having these cultural biases indoctrinated into me, and simultaneously recognizing that, like, boy, and that doesn't even begin to compare to that same thing that my Black counterparts have been experiencing their whole lives. And what a powerful intersection to be aware of. So thank you for sharing that awareness and for using your voice. So I wanted to talk to you about this idea. So when we talk to each other about having you on, you know, the reason I invite anybody to this show is because I know they're going to have a dramatically different lens to view the world through, right? And I want that. Like, I want to be able to see that and understand it, right? And so one of the things that we've talked about in the past is as people who practice New Thought, this idea of intention setting is really popular. It's like, oh, it's the new year's coming, I'm going to set my intention, you know, and really truly at the beginning of our services every single Sunday, we invite anyone who comes to participate in setting an intention, right, for the week. And so how do you see that dynamic as being something that can be used here in this subject matter? Like, how do we take that spiritual practice of intention setting, and how do we use that to help us as we're exploring, you know, racial equity and impact versus intention and so on?
Yeah, I think that sometimes it has been my experience in New Thought practices where we set an intention and then we just like, okay, the intention is set, I know it's happening. The end. And then so then we're confronted with what happens when we set an intention and then the impact is not what we intended, which freaking happens all the time. I wrote a blog post that had a lot of, you know, examples of that in my own life. And one of them specifically was when I was in college, I marched with some other students for racial equity. And I put on a poster because I believed in all of my
I can sense the embarrassment. It's like, isn't it so much when you're about to tell everybody when you were ignorant, and it's like, okay, I mean, I feel really bad. I'm going to tell you, but I got to tell you how bad I felt about it before I
Right. Well, I mean, the truth is I didn't even tell people this for a long time because I was so deeply ashamed, and I should be. Like, it's okay. But that I wrote on the poster, I wrote a couple of things, but one of the things that it said were that all lives matter. Because I am a person who truly believes in the divinity of every single human, and that is true. And I had some gracious Black friends that took their emotional energy to tell me why that was a problem. And to tell me that, like, totally get where you were coming from with that. The intention is that we want everyone to have equity and have opportunity and to be lifted up with the same amount of resources and love. But right now, people Black people in particular are not being treated that way.
So, sorry, go ahead.
No, that's okay. I just, and so like that was really important for me because I had the best intentions. And there were limiting beliefs inside of me that prevented what that intention was from turning into a manifested thing that actually had the impact that I wanted. And I think that's so key right now.
And like, how do you feel about the difference between false beliefs versus incomplete understandings?
That's a good question too. I think they can go hand in hand. They're sometimes different things and sometimes connected. Because I know that I have had many false beliefs, for example, of me saying like my voice doesn't matter. Versus perhaps I need to monitor everything that I say because I want to have the impact that I'm intending. Like there's a middle ground, right? And so almost that second one's still kind of like an incomplete thought because I'm still building upon it and trying to figure out what that means. And there's goodness in it. But if it is preventing me from ever saying anything, then it's not doing what it's supposed to do.
Well, and one of the things I'm noticing too, so I'm going to describe a dynamic that I've noticed in myself. And I'm wondering because, so I just turned 40 this year, so I'm not young anymore. Guys, I'm not a young adult. I'm not young. I'm not hip. I'm not good. But Jenna here is a millennial, technically, I think, right?
Yeah, technically.
Okay. And so I want to articulate what I experienced, and I want to see what it's like through your millennial lens, right? So right now, America is learning so much. And so I'm actually a Zennial, so I live in that weird spot between millennial and Generation X, where I grew up with an analog childhood, right? But then the internet came as I was like reaching adulthood almost at the same time. And so I integrated the internet into my life really quickly. And what I found was that I started learning things that I had not learned through our education system. And the feeling that I got about that was outrage. Like I couldn't believe, I had a high school history teacher who spent an entire semester arguing with me about the idea that the Civil War was an economic and states' rights issue. Right?
Yeah, states' rights to own slaves.
Right, states' rights to own humans.
Right.
And so I feel this great sense of outrage. And I feel like what's happening right now is that the older generations are just now realizing how long they've been indoctrinated into these white supremacist systems and white supremacist thoughts. But you as a younger person have had the advantage of being able to access that information beyond our education system. And I'm wondering, what impact has that had on you, and how does that affect the way you view and move through the world as it relates to this topic?
Yeah, I think that it does afford me a slightly different perspective. I still feel outraged at my public education often, and my my college education that I paid a lot of money for. Well, my family helps me pay a lot of money for it. Let me continue to be honest, right? Like I'm not trying to, not trying to shove anything under a rug. And so yeah, I'm 25. And I'm really now in this place of I'm done with school. I am a young professional. I live on my own. Like I am a fully functioning adult that can participate in our democracy, all of those things.
You're adulting hard as fuck right now.
Which is new. But it also, I try, I don't know if take for granted is the right word, because it is what it is. That this moment in our societal awakening, in history, however you want to say it, is me just being able to be an adult and have the access to all of the information and make my own self responsible for accessing the information. And I'm freaking glad, because it's gonna be my whole life. And I think I've got a good start, but that doesn't mean that I've got it figured out. And I guess the perspective too, is that the information is so accessible right now. But even it was when I was in high school, and it was when I was in college, and it was the past several years, and it's still been gradually understanding what that means. And it's still been, oh, that doesn't check out. Maybe I should Google more information, because like, I'm not really sure how I feel about that. And it's still been like, I've started looking a lot more into politics and local legislature since our most recent presidential election, because of how devastated I felt by those results. And so I have been doing that in leading up to right now. I read White Fragility by Robin DiAngelo when that was brought to the congregation. Although I didn't participate in that group that talked about it, I did read it. And it opened up all of this, like, whoa, I grew up in Columbia, Maryland, and went to Oakland Mills High School. I thought I knew what was up, but all of that systemic racism was still in everything that I've experienced.
Well, so in doing that, right, and recognizing that, what have been your practices in addressing, like, as you reveal and uncover these false beliefs and all of the feelings and stuff that come with it? Like, what has been your process? Where are you at in regards to like how you respond to that, and how you try to like transcend the indoctrination of ignorance and white supremacy through a spiritual lens and spiritual practice?
I think, well, I'm a crier, so that happens to me. Especially because like a lot of the stuff that is going on in our world is upsetting. And if it isn't upsetting to someone, then like you have to look at what, like, seriously. I mean, because if anyone claims to say that they care for other human beings, period, to hear people's genuine, authentic stories of their experience, of people they know or themselves being murdered or abused by police officers, being prohibited from growing and evolving in society to what they want to be because of the color of their skin, and everything, I mean, like so many other individual things. Like, first I gotta let it go here. Which doesn't take much, because I really, 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 like, I'm super empathetic, and sometimes I have to be careful not to let it cripple me too. But then trying to pay attention to what I can do, right? So a lot of that is learning about issues that are important right now. Like, for example, learning about what defunding the police means. Learning about what types of bills are potentially even going to enter Congress about this. Trying to learn more about, like, in my local area, what budgets are and what those numbers look like. Which is hard, man. They do not make that shit easy for people. And I'm coming from like a lot of free time, really privileged perspective, and I still have to work really, really hard to even get a little bit of understanding. Mm-hmm. But I feel like that's my to-do, and how can I put pressure on local legislators to do what they're supposed to do, to take care of people? Because I believe that we have to change the system by going into the system. Like from the inside.
Yeah, one of my favorite hip hop artists, Brother Ali, said in one of his licks that he put out lately, that if he goes in, all he's doing is, if he wants to fix it, he doesn't want to destroy it. He just wants to go in and clean out all the circuitry, right? And that's how I feel. Because, right, because I feel like I love the American dream, and I do think that it was framed in a phenomenal way. And so then the question is it the structures themselves that are inherently bad, or is it the way that they've been corrupted and wielded and applied that is bad? And so for me, I mean, I'm out here trying to found a new spiritual philosophy altogether, right? And so what I know is I want it to be religious. And so immediately I recognize that I have to deal with folks who've been hurt and harmed by religiosity. And so the only thing for me to do is to figure out what's mine to do in regards to helping those people be able to see that religious community itself as a premise, as a structure, as a community building tool, as a culture developing tool isn't inherently bad, but to go in and be able to say, okay, let's do it consciously, knowing what it is and make it as transparent as we can, and then start to work with those structures to promote and benefit our lives. And so when I hear you say this about our systems in America, I feel the same way, right? Which is not necessarily that what we have to do is burn it all down and start from scratch, because most of the people who want to burn it all down and start from scratch don't even know what scratch would be, right? And I'm a warrior. Like, I'm down to burn things down and burn things out, but to burn things all the way down to the ground with no idea of like what it is you're trying to create feels like a perpetuation of ignorance. And when I hear you talking, what I'm hearing is get in there, figure it out, sort it out, be frustrated, be angry, realize that the structures that you're learning about are shitty ass structures that are designed to fuck people up rather than lift them up, and then begin to do the work of figuring out how do we transform that stuff. So if we're thinking about that, what does it mean for us to be spiritually engaged and then to pray, which is ours to do, like we did at the beginning of this time together, but then what? Right? Like, what's ours after that? What does it mean for us to pray and move our feet?
Right. I think it has to do with being able to have faith in something, have faith and hold a higher vision of what the world can look like, but understand that we are all integral parts of that. So that it's not enough to just to do a prayer and know that the world is loved and safe and whole, and then go back to our normal daily activities that have very little influence on whether or not that's true. And it means being uncomfortable. And it means, for me, lately, I've been feeling like crap, like I can never do enough. There's never going to be enough that I can do. And so not going quite to that place, knowing that I inherently am enough, and so is every other person. And so I have it within me to listen within and listen without, to synthesize those things together and move forward with confidence on something.
So what does that look like for you?
So it looks like actually having conversations with people when they say something that's racist. Because if I want to live in a world where that doesn't happen anymore, then we have to hold people accountable and change the societal acceptance of that being okay. And I think it looks like, again, like digging into this like local and federal level of government and other systems, to see what in it doesn't match that vision, right? And it's like, even if internally we're like doing a prayer, we have all of the different parts of the divine or whatever, the idea, the law, and then the creation. When there is something that like happens in the middle part that makes what comes out on the other side not look like what we thought it was supposed to, we have to think about what internal beliefs and structures are preventing that from coming to be. And sometimes it's false beliefs, and sometimes it's limiting beliefs, and sometimes it's a misunderstanding because literally everything in society has told us it's supposed to work this way. And now we have the opportunity to have a new thought that it doesn't have to be this way, right? I mean, but that's how I see it. It's literally the same thing, and it is happening right now in real time that can have serious impact on the well-being of everybody. Yeah, so it does mean praying, because like you can't get, I mean, I don't know about you. I can't even get to a point where I can like rationally and calmly think about things if I'm living in the like angry outrage that I often feel.
Well, and I'm trying, and that's a big part of my journey, right? I think people are watching my project and saying like, damn, this dude is pissed. And it's like, pissed. I'm pissed as fuck. And in the same breath,
that even little Jenna, who everyone often has an opinion of being like just this very zen, loving human, is also angry.
Yeah. Yeah. And then our different depths of outrage and the way that we express it is different. And so what are some real spiritual, like what brass tacks when you're in that place? What do you do? What do you do when you're in that just blown out, about to sob, angry tears, right? Like warrior tears for justice are getting ready to pour from your face. And when you're in that space, how do you compose yourself? How do you use spirituality in your spiritual practice to interrupt that and to bring it into kind of like closer into alignment of what you want it to be?
Yeah, sometimes it just looks like having a glass of water and taking a few deep breaths. I have been meditating more regularly lately, which is kind of a newer thing for me, honestly, and has been really good to take the time. And often in my meditation, some of the things I've been listening to have a guided portion, and then it's quiet. And in the quiet, I'll say an affirmative prayer kind of in that meditative space, and then let all of that go. And it helps to synthesize all of those things so that I'm in a space where I just like take a moment to go within. Sometimes it means just kind of like stopping a reaction and learning more, or like picking up something to read or listening to somebody else first. For me, honestly, because I think it's easy to get swept up in something or a post you see and like wanted to share it and just want, or like immediately want to launch into reaction, where taking a couple of moments can make a difference. But I also have to be careful not to go into that place of meditation and then have the moment pass me by and be like, oh, whoops, like I didn't act on something that needed to be addressed because I was taking care of myself. Right? And I'm still figuring out what the heck that means too.
So what is that about? So we've talked about like tangible action, right? So we talked about, hey, I got to pray. And prayer is about interrupting the incessant mind. Prayer is about setting intention. Prayer is about creating space for something greater than what's currently happening. And then we talked about getting in action, praying and moving our feet, educating ourselves about the issues, identifying ways that we can engage with it, thinking locally, really hyper locally, so you can get the job done right in your own town, but still being open to the larger ideas that involve our whole nation. And so my question is, how do you balance this idea of faith and action? How do you find balance in that?
Yeah, I think in the knowing that it's all the same thing, which is kind of what I was saying, that I feel so much that it is a spiritual process to become aware of something new, understand what I thought was true before, and recognize that I don't necessarily feel that way anymore. Be able to do the releasing of that previous thought and the embracing and nurturing of the new idea, and knowing that that process is God, is divine, is all that there is, right? And I think it's important too, just to remember that, like, if we're holding for ourselves that we are whole and complete, then we are safe to do this work. And that means it will be uncomfortable. And that means it will break shit down inside that feels so bad. And it means like, if I'm trying to do it and I mess up and I'm like, crap, man. Like, and that happened kind of recently, where I reached out to somebody I didn't even know that well. And I got like a little bit too, I think, like apologetic or weird. And I was like, shit, man, that's not what I was trying to do. But to recognize it, to like fully go into it and then be ready to receive and understand what's going to come back, and that they might not always match up. But having faith that the universe always has my back is kind of the way that I look at it. Is that doesn't mean that I will always say the perfect right things, even if that's what I'm praying for. Because the perfect right things might be making a mistake so that I can be corrected, so that I can work on that inside stuff. And it's easier for me to say better words next time.
Well, and for me, it's interesting because I'm constantly using that as a metric, right? Like I'm constantly like, okay, so I'm getting feedback from people, and then I have to contextualize the feedback. Okay, this person is a baby boomer and they had this kind of lifestyle and grew up in this kind of way and have this kind of personality and intersections, and the feedback I'm getting. And so like all of that can get really confusing.
Yeah.
And I feel like if I get too far out into that, I'm starting to micromanage too many personalities that I couldn't possibly totally fully understand. And so it really calls me to move back to like, well, okay, instead of asking myself how the world feels about me,
right,
how do I feel about my principles? How do I feel about my integrity within those principles? And how do I feel about where there were areas where if I did it differently, I would feel better about who I am in the world?
right.
I think shifting that, right? Because a lot of what I get from folks is like, it's going to impact these people this way, and it's going to do, and it's like, yeah, but I'm a white man. I'm all of it. I'm a white, cisgendered, heterosexual man, able-bodied, like whatever, throw it out. That's what I am, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I've got so much ignorance in there that I'm just desperate to get rid of. And I think people are like, yeah, this is the greatest challenge I meet is people are like, yeah, but you shouldn't be letting your ignorance harm other people. And I feel that. And so I try to be really responsible in that.
Mm-hmm.
And what I recognize is that the perpetuation of my ignorance is the greatest disservice I can do to them. That's the greatest harm I can do,
Right.
is to literally remain ignorant. And so if I'm brave and I take the slings and arrows and allow myself to be publicly subject to all of this work, how many countless other people are going to watch me do the work and learn things and avoid things and do better and all that kind of stuff? And so that's where my voice comes from, right? Is that like, cool, if everybody's too afraid to do it, like nobody wants to jump in the water and see if it's down there, I'll risk a broken leg. Like we're going to, right? Like we're going to try and get this thing done. And so when you think about the work in your life that you're doing right now,
Mm-hmm.
and you think about how that relates to when you're viewing yourself either through the lens of how you're being experienced or how you're expressing yourself, where do you find balance in there? Because you're trying to take impact and intention into account, right? But how do you balance that? Like, I'm concerned with what people think of me or how they interpret with me, and I'm concerned with who I am being and how I feel about how I'm expressing myself.
Yeah. I mean, I am very grateful. I feel that I have a deep sense of intuition that I've been connected to, I think, really my whole life. And that has been a guiding force. Like you said, like when you do something and it feels kind of icky inside, it's a good indication that maybe there's some growth. And you're right, because literally every person has a different perspective. And so people are going, to give feedback, and some of it will align with my growth, and some of it will be like, okay, thank you, next.
I got a bunch of racist ass people telling me to shut the fuck up that I ain't listening to, right? And so that's what's weird about it, is because there's plenty of people that I am having an impact on, and that impact might be considered negative because they're freaking out and their feelings are hurt, and yet I'm like, yeah, but if it takes hurting your feelings to get this work done, then I don't know what else to tell you other than get it done.
Right. My best friend's mom is a psychologist, and we were talking a little bit about this, and she said that her mom was saying that for someone to change their internal beliefs, sometimes it takes trauma, like psychologically. And we don't wish anyone to have trauma. But so where can we like soften and let when people tell us we did something that was hurtful, to be able to feel bad about it and know that doesn't mean we're bad, but it means that we have an opportunity to be better. And that's the thing too. I take it both ways. Like, and I'm still, honestly, I'm working still on being the force that is telling people that they're doing messed up things or saying things that are not okay. I'm not as good at that. And I'm working on it. I recognize that that's not.
I'll help you out with that shit.
No, thank you. Yeah, that's why I value our
if somebody needs
friendship.
to fuck up, then that's just what's up.
But also it feels to me to be in integrity with myself, I have to also be ready to receive that and prepared to like look at it. Because if I want anybody else to do it, like and just because I do it doesn't mean they're going to be on that same page, and like we'll get there. But I think, and for me too, it's been continuing to read and listen to lots of other voices, even ones that I don't think I agree with, right? Because if I want my opinion that is different to influence how somebody else feels, they would then have to be willing to engage with that, to see any sort of different perspective and think about it critically, right? Not saying that I will read everybody's opinion or like hear everyone's feedback and equally be like, oh yeah, I just learned a new thing. That's part of my core system of values. I'm about it. Because if we did that, then it would be going like this all the time and some bad shit would get in there. But listening to it and understanding where people are coming from, I think is important. I read a book called Dying of Whiteness by Jonathan Metzl, or I think Mendel. Oh my gosh. Ooh, edit this part out.
I'm definitely not, but we'll make sure the right.
Okay. No, I'm pretty sure that's his name. I could look it up.
You can't edit out. You can't edit it out.
Sorry. But what he was doing, he was studying phenomenon in rural white communities, on the way that the government in particular like has changed legislation around guns, around education, and around healthcare that has really shaped the way that a lot of people think about these things, a way that makes even like it makes people who believe so strongly in these ideals that they're actually making decisions that are harming themselves, let alone other people. Wow. In marginalized communities. Wow. And what reading that book really brought was like, whoa, like this goes deep. And I am in no position to like blame somebody for what every part of their upbringing has. And I got to remind myself of that too when I'm like, oh crap, that was a subconscious racist thing that I totally just thought. And they're like, ah!
I love when people wake up to their whiteness and then the first time, because this has been described to me, I think it's just a natural part of the process. The first time that they either are walking down the street in a dark alley and they see a black person, or that they're a white person who is imagining like they're a home invasion or some other morbid thought that happens to your mind depending on what's going on. And they realize that the first instinct was to make that person a black person or to be afraid of the black person. And then for people to be vulnerable enough to be like, I've been telling people my whole life I'm not racist, and I want to tell you that I don't get scared of black people just because I see them in the alleyway. But when we start paying attention, suddenly we notice, yeah, I'm not in my head saying like, oh shit, there's a black man. But the black man comes walking out of the alley and my pulse rate rises and my adrenaline kicks in and I start paying attention to my environment more vigilantly. And like when we're aware of that kind of stuff, it comes with the emotional burdens of the awareness.
Right.
And so like, what do you do when you feel that emotional burden of the awareness that you're now, that you now have? What do you do spiritually in order to care for yourself in those moments?
Well, when you first were asking the question, my brain initially went to, okay, you have feelings, but you don't need to express all those feelings. You need to get over those feelings, is what I tell myself sometimes. I don't know if that's always the most spiritual thing, but I'm like, shoot, like you owe it to every single black person you know and don't know to deal with that shit and not think that way anymore. That's how I talk to myself. Uh,
I think you get an idea what my internal dialogue's like.
well, right, yeah. But not to dismiss that it happened, like, because it's very easy to be like, holy moly, that was uncomfortable. I need to just go do something else for a minute and then not revisit it. Like, and it's easy. It's easy because also in our society, we're not taught how to deal with things that are uncomfortable and our own emotions. It's like we're not taught necessarily to listen to others' perspectives and incorporate that into our own realm of thinking, or even like what it actually means to care for other people, or that is valuable. I have to like keep going back because lots of people are never even taught that anybody else matters except for them.
Well, and it's so interesting because New Thought is so full of that shit. Because New Thought is fucking rife with this, like, it's all about you. It's all about you. It's all about you. It's all about you. And it's so easily devolve into a narcissistic puddle of like self-centered ridiculousness, right? It's just a bypass to the rest of the world. And, for me, as a fighter, I view relationships that way sometimes whenever there's conflict, right? But when the conflict is built on collaboration, everybody's technically on the same team. And so I describe it this way. So when we go and we would go to a tournament, right? And at the tournament, you have your combatant. So that's the person that's going to be competing, the competitor. You have their opponent. You have the competitor's coaching staff, whoever that happens to be, their family and friend support staff, and then the coach and the families of the other side, right? And so when I get into these struggles with people, I have to recognize where I am in that. And if I'm an opponent, I'm out to win, right? Like if I'm an opponent, I'm listening to all my coaches that I've studied, all the people that have taught me how, what to understand and how to understand it, all the time I spent in the gym training my techniques, everything that I did, I'm out there to win against that person, right? And if I were concerned about, well, am I doing something to them that might upset them or harm them or exploit them in that way, because we both agreed to be in that fight, right? Which is a boundary thing. I think that's a good conversation for you and I for another time. But, so they've got their coach to go back to. If they lose or if they get harmed or if they feel like something went wrong or something they didn't see, their coaches were there to see it. And so it's not my job to be there doing that work with them. My role in that point is to be doing my work, because I'm going to have my harms or I'm going to do things that are out of step, and I'm going to have to go to my coach and explain myself, right? I'm going to have to go back to my coaching staff. I'm going to have to go to my friends and family and explain myself, right? And so when I think about all of those dynamics, when you're in a collaborative state of agreement, those things can be cultivated to be super duper healthy. And I'm reflecting on when that agreement and that boundary hasn't been set and I'm just out in the street roughing people up, right? I have to start to be more mindful of that. And I want to go out in the street and rough people up. Like that's not a thing that I think is necessarily technically bad, right? But I think that if what I'm doing to rough them up is roughing up their emotions, but what I'm doing to rough up their emotions is my awareness being articulated and my truth being articulated, because I'm trying to advocate for a specific idea. I have to remember that some folks walk into those conversations and it's like they were wandering down the street and they're like, oh, this place looks interesting, and they came in to the gym and we immediately like started punching them, right? Like they deserve to at least be given that like contextual note, like, hey, so we're fighting in here. So if you didn't come in to fight, you shouldn't be in here. And you should be asking yourself why you don't want to fight, right? And that kind of a thing. And so I'm wondering for you, when you think about the relationships that you have and the dynamics when you're talking about this stuff and working on this stuff and who you are and who other people are, what point of references do you use to kind of like center yourself without being at the center of attention all the time?
Yeah, I think, well, if you want to take it from like a social media perspective, for example, people have been talking about, I think the phrase elevating melanated voices or elevating voices of color being really important, because at the end of the day, no matter how much work I do, I am still white. And that's the truth. And if somebody whose real experience is calling them to share that can say it better than me, I will give them the mic. And I'm humble that way. Like, I don't really feel like I need to always say things. But by exposing myself to more voices, I can then be like, hey, listen to this person. Or like, and also coming from my own perspective too. What other tools? I mean, because I don't always, well, I don't know. I was gonna say I don't always think of it like a fight, but like being in the streets at a protest, standing there chanting, holding on my sign, and looking in the face of the police officer with a machine gun guarding the White House, like, we are kind of there to fight. I don't really want to get in combat with that person because they have a machine gun, and that's also not okay. But that's also a conversation for maybe another time. That like there are times to use the words like in battles. But again, I think understanding the context is important.
Yeah, context
And
matters.
the person, because you've always said too, and I appreciate this, you're like, the way that you say things reach people that would never engage in any sort of that stuff because it's always too soft and floaty, and they don't like that shit, and I don't blame them. But sometimes I do.
And we need some of that too. Like, make no mistake, we need some. We can't, right? Like, there's such a broad spectrum of experiential emotional bandwidth and resiliency bandwidth, right? Like we get into these ideas of binaries and spectrums, right? But there's just such a broad spectrum. It's almost a field even, really, of those kinds of experiences. So it's like, who am I catering to if not my own sense of divinity? And like, can I believe, it's interesting to be the one who's not welcome and to recognize that, and then to say like, hey, so we're making statements about how welcoming we are, and I'm not feeling welcome, and here's why. Are we able to have a valid conversation about that?
Right.
And so I call people in, and then I get spit out, and so now I'm out, and so now we're going to call people out, right? And like, I have methodologies and strategies for this kind of stuff, and so I place faith in them because they work in the areas that they work, and I keep myself from falling into the booby trap of thinking that they're universally true, that they're always going to work for every single person, because it's impossible. I wouldn't give myself or anyone else that kind of credit, right? So here's what I'd love to hear.
Yeah.
First, we're going to find out how people can find you in just a minute. But before that, I just want to find out if there was something that you felt was just vital for people to hear today. Just something that you thought was like, if you don't hear anything else today, I want you to know this. What would that be?
I've been thinking a lot about a conversation I had in an accountability group that I joined where we're doing some learning and discussing. And it was my first week in the actual discussion this past week. Someone had mentioned the idea of like prosperity work, which I think is often connected with our teaching, and that healing people's consciousness is what it takes for them to be something in the world, like to come to their potential. And someone else responded like, that's just so messed up because there's so many external factors that are, prohibiting people from doing this. And what I've really been feeling is that it's a yes and, because I do believe, and I think lots of people in our teaching feel like we want people to have the consciousness to feel divine and to be who they are in the world. But we can't expect anyone to get even close to that until we heal the causes in our society that keep people from having their basic needs, that keep people from having a platform on which to even begin the work. And no matter how hard any of our individual journeys have been in learning about our true selves and practicing spirituality and rooting out those beliefs we've been taught in our life, it's not the same thing as having all of society be against you. And if you're feeling still like that part isn't true for people, then you've got to start listening harder. we've got to listen louder than we sing if we're going to be a choir that makes music together. And I really believe that the singing is still important. We've got to call people out. We've got to express ourselves. I'm so grateful we're having this conversation. But it's important to look always at that deep root cause of things and know that those are the places to apply our power and our love, so that we can actually all be lifted up and celebrated and get to live with freedom and joy that every person deserves. So yeah.
Oh yeah, so whatever.
And so that's what I'd like to
Boom.
say.
So, you know. Oh my gosh, Jenna, thank you so much. I think people are gonna love this interview. I think there's just so much more to cover. You're such a dynamic human. You're someone that I value and respect so much. So I pray that we'll do this again in the near future and be able to share more of this with folks out there in the world. And between now and then, how can people check you out? Where can people read your blog? What's up? Tell the people who you are and where they can find you.
Thanks. So I'm just a person. And my name is Jenna Pekofsky. My blog is called JP Feeding the Soul, all one word, which, you know, it's just is food and it's soul food. So my most recent blog post that is more specifically centered on this experience is on there, as well as some other fun recipes and things if you're into that. I have an Instagram that is that same handle, so it's JP Feeding the Soul. And you can find me on Facebook, Jenna Pekofsky. And I don't use Twitter. And if you want to have conversation with me outside, you can message me, I guess, through Facebook, and I will consider whether or not I want to do that with you. But like, you know, like, and that's the thing. I'm open to having conversations. I'm grateful for anyone that wants to hear what I have to say, and wants to help me be better at saying stuff. So
awesome.
Thanks for being that person too.
Oh, thank you. And thank you for being that person for me too. And so I just want to thank you so much for being here today. I'm so grateful for us spending this time. We've been talking about it forever and we finally got it done, and it's all my fault. So I take total responsibility.
Hey.
But I'm excited to see what we talk about in the future. And I'm excited to invite folks to you know, get to hear more of your voice as you discover it, as it begins to get shaped and molded. And, you know, I'm excited to share that with people. So thanks for providing me the opportunity to do that with you. Okay. And so since we started this thing in prayer, I'm gonna invite us to go ahead and end it that same way. So please join me in this affirmative prayer. As we just come back to recognize again that idea of oneness, the idea that there is only one thing and that one thing is good and that goodness is all that there is. And to call it forward and to imagine if we accept that truth, and I do right now, what does that inform me about myself? It tells me that I am an emanation of the divine, that God itself, the creative force of the entire universe, has decided to become me, and here I am. And that in my presence, I am simply a measure of that whole divine thing, but that divine thing is the whole of what I am and what Jenna is and what every person in this prayer could possibly be. It's the only thing we could possibly be. And so what I know is that as we continue this spiritual journey of racial equity, as we continue to figure out what is ours to do, what is ours to know, what is ours to learn, what is ours to say, what is ours to be in the world, how we move from our powerful prayer into our prayerful action. That as we do that work, we discover new things about ourselves, and we do so with grace. We discover things about our society, and we do that with grace. And we do it with a sense of accountability that allows us to feel empowered, to know that anything that we find that we believe needs transformation benefits from our own transcendence of it. And so we transcend it all now in this prayer by simply committing to the faithful willingness to show up over and over and over again. We have faith in our own resilience because God has placed within us a divine heart that will continue to beat no matter how much our emotions take a beating. and that will comfort and nurture us when we do. And so we comfort and nurture each other. We remind ourselves to care for ourselves and for the people in our lives, and to do so with great, great responsibility. And so I'm just giving thanks for this marvelous conversation today. The audience that sees it, all 1, 2, 5, 6, or 400, or 1,000, or million, whatever. It doesn't even matter who you are or where you're at. You are in this prayer with us and touched throughout time, traveling through time as a conscious statement that we are receiving this good together, and that as we receive it, there's a goodness in it for which we are grateful. And so in this gratitude, I just surrender it. All the stuff that's outside of my control, and there's a vast larger amount of that than there is stuff that's in my control. And so I just let it all go, knowing that I continue to move my feet with the inspiration of this prayer in mind, and that allows my steps to be placed with faith in front of me over and over and over again, continuing to pursue the justice that I have a vision of being a part of, and becoming more just with and in myself and in the world, and knowing that as I do so, that the law of God itself is in fact just and brings forward justice in every measure that we call it forth. And so we call it forth in its fullness now, knowing that it arrives as us, as our time together, as our continued learning, and as a world that continues to work better and better and better for more and more people. It is already done, and it is already so. And so everything that happens now is my part that I play in unfolding it and making it my reality. It is already done, and so it is. Amen.
And so it is.
What up? Reverend Brian here again, and this is the end of the video where I ask you, if you like this content, like and share it. And if you subscribe to it, that would be amazing. And most importantly, if you want to be notified every time I upload a new video, just click that bell and YouTube will make sure that you never miss a single one. Thank you so much for supporting my work. Thank you for taking the time to watch this video. And I'm just knowing that something amazing is unfolding in your life right now. Peace. What's up, motherfuckers? No, I did the same thing with Javon.
What if I do that?
What up, motherfuckers? What does that even sound like? I don't even.
What up, motherfuckers? It would, like, people would be like,